Hey, Jaxon here, and today's video is something that's been 6 months in the making. That's right, we're finally going to be taking a look at Cars Mater National Championship. Because I'm afraid of what he'll do to me if I don't. In order to talk about Mater National, we first need to go back to June 2006, right when the first Cars movie came out. Just like any other animated film released during this time, it got a video game tie-in, developed by RAMJAM Studios, and published by THQ, the kings of licensed games during this era. Much like the film, Cars the video game was a commercial success, selling over 8 million copies by May 2007, and giving THQ a very nice payday. However, even after its theatrical run, Cars still proved to be a massive moneymaker for Disney. According to Pixar's Jay Ward, a large part of this was because of DVD sales for the film, with over 5 million copies sold within its first 2 days on the market. But I bet an even bigger part of Cars' success was because of its merchandise. According to estimates from when the movie was only 2 weeks old, Cars merchandise had apparently made nearly $600 million. Over 100 million more than what the movie would make during its entire run at the box office. THQ must have seen these absolutely crazy numbers. Remember, they had the video game license for Cars and decided to start milking the franchise for all it's worth, since we got 2 sequels to Cars the video game in 2007 and 2009 respectively, with Mater National being the first. This isn't an uncommon practice, especially for THQ. They'd actually done the same thing with The Incredibles a couple of years prior with Rise of the Underminer, a beat-em-up game that tried to resolve that movie's cliffhanger ending years before its sequel did. Much like the first Cars game, I never got the opportunity to play it as a kid, my only exposure to it being through Let's Plays on YouTube, and a couple of storybooks loosely based on the game's plot. I got it for Christmas in 2022, and finally played it and beat it. I even got 100% completion. But it's been a while, and I felt like playing Mater National again, even before recent events. I mean, I already covered the first game and its weird handheld ports, so it's only fitting that I cover every single game with Lightning McQueen's red face slapped on it. In order to talk about Mater National's story, we have to take a look back at the first Cars movie. More specifically, its ending. When meeting Sally after the race in Los Angeles, Lightning talks to her about why he's back in town, saying,
"Actually, I thought I'd stop and stay a while. I hear this place is back on the map."
It is?
Yeah, there's some rumor floating around that some hotshot piston cup race car is setting up his big racing headquarters here.
Really? Oh, well, there goes the town.
Now this is obviously supposed to be Lightning's way of telling Sally that he's settling down in Radiator Springs, since there are no racing headquarters that appear in any of the shorts, movies, or really any pieces of Cars media released after the first film. Except for the video games. The devs must have taken that line literally, since not only is there a billboard teasing the construction of Lightning's racing headquarters in the first Cars game, but the plot of Mater National completely revolves around them. Lightning's headquarters are finally being built, stadium and all, and to celebrate, the town is hosting its first international championship, with cars from all over the world coming to compete in a series of races. All of which will be commentated by Mater. But whoa! Mater accidentally calls it the Mater National Championship when announcing it on live TV. What a funny joke. So funny that we should name the game after it and have Mater take up 60% of the box art. Now to be fair, Mater still has a pretty big role in the game outside of this part at the beginning. He appears in like 90% of the cutscenes, and there are a lot of points where you play as him, which I'll get to later. But this is still a mainly Lightning McQueen romp like the last game. Following the intro cutscene, we're dropped into Radiator Springs as Lightning McQueen. We're supposed to go and find our first race to compete in, but for now, we can just roam around the open world and take a look at all the changes made to the town in this game. They're bad. There's some cool additions to Radiator Springs, like of course, Lightning's racing headquarters, these mattresses in the middle of the movie theater you can bounce on to get bonus points, and you can visit Luigi's to switch between different wheels for Lightning, or his monster truck form after finding the necessary collectibles for both in the open world. You do the same thing to get paint jobs at Ramone's as well. But outside of that, this game's version of Radiator Springs is a major downgrade. There's plenty of areas from the first game that are completely inaccessible both in Radiator Springs and Telfin Pass, another area of the open world. which is made even more annoying by the fact that there are certain races where the game does let you go to these areas. Now, to be fair, these areas have been redesigned in a way that I wouldn't really call linear, but they're not very well suited for open world exploration, such as these wooden structures and tornadoes and radiator springs, or this section in Tailfin Pass with sand and falling boulders that slow the player down. But I don't really care. If I could go here in the last game, I should be able to in this one. That's enough talk about the open world for now. Let's get back into the story. Selecting the first road race in the game, a cutscene starts where lightning almost crashes into Philip, Mater National's first new character. And by new character, I mean old character, because he is literally just the British car from the first game, but red. Since he's British, he was driving on the wrong side of the road, which caused him to almost crash into McQueen. How hilarious. Philip starts freaking out that he's meeting the Lightning McQueen, and due to some wacky misunderstandings, the two end up in a race with Doc, Fred, and one of the Queen's cars from the first game. The races in Mater National function the exact same way as Cars 1. 3 laps, 5 cars, try to be number 1. Sometimes they try to shake things up, such as longer races with fewer laps, or relay races where you switch to a different character every lap, but it's mostly just more of what Cars 1 had to offer. I did notice one change made to the gameplay while racing though, and that's McQueen's steering. If you've watched my videos on the first Cars game, you'll know that something I was critical of the console version for was its steering. It was way too wide, even when using the game's power slide, which led to a bunch of moments where I crashed into walls, no matter how hard I tried not to. The devs must have known about this issue, since the steering in Mater National is a lot tighter, and the power slide is way more useful. Don't get me wrong, there's still going to be moments where no matter how hard you try, you're going to bump into something, but overall, the steering and power slide is way more reliable and consistent than the first games. After racing Philip, we're given more events to choose from in the open world. A lot of these are races that are required to beat the story, but there are also plenty of optional events that shake the gameplay a bit. There's Fillmore's Fuel Frenzy, where the player must drive a certain distance while maintaining their fuel tank. Race and Chase, where you have to tag another car and make it back to your base. Tractor Tipping makes a return from the first game with brand new mechanics. There's a minigame based on Mater and the Ghostlight, a short included on the DVD for Cars. And there's a rhythm game with Ramon that I was complete garbage at. But the strangest one of all would have to be a minigame where you play as Mike and Sully from Monsters, Inc. More specifically, their car versions seen in the epilogue of Cars 1, and try to get more laugh canisters than the other before a timer runs out. There's not much to say about these beyond their basic descriptions. They're all pretty fun and a nice break from the normal gameplay. I found some of them to get pretty difficult at times, whether that was because of your AI opponents cheating or just a genuine skill issue. But I didn't find a single bad one in the bunch. Except for one. The monster trucks. In the first game, Lightning was briefly modified into a monster truck for one race. It was pretty basic, and only required you to take a couple of left or right turns for 12 laps. Mater National, however, decides to expand on that brief bit of gameplay. I already mentioned that you can drive around the open world as Monster McQueen after getting the necessary parts, but after getting the parts to turn Mater into a monster truck, a series of monster truck races are unlocked, and they suck. They function like the other races in the game, but require you to pass these checkpoints in the correct order to complete a lap. Thing is, the monster trucks weren't made with more precise movements in mind, which makes passing through these checkpoints a major pain. Look at my gameplay. I'm pressing right and the power slide button at the same time, yet this happens to me. And it's not like the AI is having a better time. I played this on Champion difficulty, and look how much of a lead I have on them. Overall, not very fun, and probably the worst part of the game. Back to the main story, we come across two new race cars while completing events in the open world. Otto, who's from Germany, and Giovanni, who's from Italy. There's not really a whole lot to say about the two. Otto's kind of snobbish and obsessed with racing, trying to at every possible opportunity. Well, Giovanni is Italian, but that's it, that's the whole character. And since he's Italian, he talks like this. The game tries to build Giovanni up as McQueen's rival, but it doesn't really work since after his introduction, we don't see him again until the end of the game. Not only that, but their rivalry is just them joking with each other about how they're going to beat the other and win the championship. The most interesting aspect of Giovanni isn't even anything relating to the character himself, but that Luigi and Guido kiss up to him whenever he shows up because he's a Ferrari, which is a pretty funny joke and perfectly in character for them. After completing enough events in town, the player will be given a stadium race to complete a chapter. You see, the first Cars game was split into 5 chapters, which slowly introduced the player to new game mechanics and areas of the open world before ending with a Piston Cup race. Mater National operates in a similar manner, although there are 3 chapters instead of 5, one for each area of the open world, and instead of Piston Cup races, they end with a race inside a Lightning Stadium. I really like the stadium races. I wasn't a really big fan of Cars 1's Piston Cup races. They weren't terrible, but they stripped Lightning of almost all his abilities from the open world, which made them get pretty boring pretty easily, since you're just going straight with the occasional left turn, not helped by the fact that each race was 12 laps. The stadium races have McQueen keep all of his abilities, and the track is more than just going straight and left. It also has right turns. They might lack the climatic spectacle of the Piston Cup races, they're basically just the game's normal races in a new location, but the stadium races are really fun and a nice way to close out each chapter. After completing our first stadium race, Chapter 2 of the game begins, where we unlock a new area of the map, Ornament Valley.
Okay, so anyway, stay tuned everybody, because this week is going to be supercharged.
It's received a massive overhaul, getting the most changes out of all the areas in the open world. Not only are there new locations for both Luigi's and Ramon's, I guess they're a franchise now, not only are there a bunch of sand dunes to spin out on, but there's been an entire RV park and airport added to the map, the latter of which is huge. They tried to warn us, but we didn't listen. Sorry. That being said, there are still areas you can only access during races, such as these caves that the game refers to as the Turkey, or more caves. But I think these ones are supposed to be a mine. Even if I'm disappointed that I can't free roam these areas, the additions to the map that I can more than make up for it. Ornament Valley is a completely different place now. Despite its wildly different appearance, the map mainly consists of you doing the same stuff you were in Radiator Springs, although there is one thing it has that Radiator Springs doesn't: the Rust Bucket Stadium. In the first game, the Rust Bucket had only 2 races in it, one where you played as Mater and raced against his cousins, and the other was the monster truck race with McQueen I talked about earlier. I already went into how this game tried to expand on the monster truck gameplay, and failed, but it also tried to expand on that first race with Mater, and I think it does a good job at it. Mater isn't just racing against his cousins anymore, he's also facing off against Emma, a rally car from England. The track designs are different every single time, and each race is 3 laps, compared to the original's 12. In order to compensate for the lower lap count, the layout for each track has a lot more going on than the original Rust Bucket race, and to my surprise, it's more challenging as well. The AI for these races did not mess around. I had to restart a couple of times to get first place. Probably would have still landed in the top 3 if I didn't, but my ego's too big. I have to win every race in this baby game. After winning all 4 Rust Bucket races, Emma is genuinely impressed with Mater's racing skills, becoming his very first fan.
Fans? Shoot, I ain't got no fans. Well, unless you count the sheriff, but he has to come watch me for legal reasons.
Wait, so does that mean that Sheriff is canonically Mater's legal guardian? Is he on watch for committing some sort of crime? Mater, what did you do? Explain yourself! The final story race in Ornament Valley takes place in the mines I mentioned earlier, and it's one of my favorites in the game. To give a bit of context, entering Ornament Valley for the first time plays a cutscene where Mater tells Lightning about some strange sounds in the distance, with Mater thinking that it's the ghost light. Sarge is called in to investigate, and after completing all the required events in the valley, he and McQueen discover that the source of all these noises was Gudmud, a rally car from Sweden, who was driving inside of Ornament Valley's old mines. Gudmud tries to get McQueen to race with him, an offer which he rejects because, no headlights. But Sarge gives McQueen his night vision goggles, and with that, it's time to race. It's pretty fun. And I really like the mine area that you go through. They even turn on this filter whenever McQueen enters the mines in order to simulate the look of his night vision goggles. He doesn't actually wear them during the race, it's just the filter, so I guess McQueen just absorbed their abilities like he's Kirby or something. Following the race against Gudmud, there's another stadium race, and then we're on to Tailfin Pass.
Everything's great, Mater.
Look, I done made you cry with that last question.
I'm not crying.
Sure you are, right there. A tear.
That's not a tear, that's condensation. It's dew.
There ain't no dew.
Trust me, it's not a tear. Look at me. Do I look sad?
Zoom in. Let's have a look at the tears of a champion.
Unlike Ornament Valley, Tailfin Pass hasn't received a lot of changes, although the few it has are pretty big. For one, half the map is gone, and the larger one too. The half we travel across in normal gameplay is only the area surrounding Wheel Well, making Tailfin Pass, which was probably the biggest of the 3 areas in the last game, the smallest in Mater National. And it's not even close. It's pretty unfortunate too, because like I mentioned earlier, you can access the other half during certain races, and it's so cool. You can definitely tell that the devs put all their effort for Tailfin Pass into this part of the map, because it's completely different from how it was in Cars 1. Not only can you access Tailfin Pass's mine from the last game, but there's now an entire mining town built around it. This is so cool, why can't I free roam in it? As for changes that I can free roam, this cliff from Cars 1 has been turned into a normal road with a little sand area below it. And somebody must have gotten the dynamite out, because you can now go inside one of the pass's mountains and drive through this cave. It even has an upper path you could use as a shortcut during races, or to get a collectible from when free roaming. That's really it for Tailfin Pass in terms of gameplay. There isn't anything exclusive to it like with Ornament Valley, you're just doing the same stuff as before, but in terms of story, it's got some stuff going on. After finishing enough events across the map, we're introduced to Koji, a drift racer from Japan. He has my favorite design out of all the new characters introduced in Mater National, but in order to compensate for that, the writers gave him the least personality. He likes drifting, and he speaks Japanese. Only Japanese. And Lightning has to use Mater to translate what he's saying. Translator Mater, that's funny. Beat Koji in a race, and it's time for the Mater National Finals. Construction on Lightning Stadium is complete, and we can finally get to see him and Giovanni rip it up on the racetrack. There are humans inside these cars. McQueen and Giovanni tear through a red ribbon in order to open the track, and with that, we're on to the 3rd and final stadium race. I wish there was more I could say about it, but it's just more what the last 2 are like. Although I will admit, it is pretty climatic seeing the stadium finally built with a bunch of JPEGs watching in the stands. Finish the race, and we're finally done with Cars Mater National Championship. It was a joke, okay? Okay, so after beating Giovanni fair and square, Luigi comes in and starts pulling stuff out of his ass about how Giovanni unfairly lost. How the sun was in his eyes, how he was distracted by all the people around him, how his tires were flat, etc. By this point, it's already been determined Lightning won, but they decide to throw Luigi a bone and have one more race. So instead of ending with a climatic stadium race, the Mater Nationals go out with another one of the game's relay races. I'm not complaining, the relay race was fun, it's just an extremely weird note for Mater National to go out on. It would be like if after Lightning won the race at Los Angeles in the first game, Doc went, "Nah son, let me show you how us old timers get things done." And then the game ended with a Piston Cup race with him. Let me finish what I'm saying. So like Mater was trying to say before, there is one more stadium race. But you only get to play it after sitting through the game's credits and getting 100% on the game. I booted up, and this is literally the relay race I just played, only now I play as McQueen for the whole thing. That was not worth it. Beating the race plays one final cutscene where McQueen takes all the bumper stickers Lizzie's been putting on him for finishing all of Mater National's minigames, and places them on this plaque at his headquarters. The cutscene even has Red the Fire Truck make a cameo. He also appears during one of the game's road races and in a level of tractor tipping. Mater National, along with the PSP version of Cars 1, are the only times he's appeared in a Cars game as far as I'm aware. I just realized I'm getting sidetracked. Moving on.
Well, we wrapped up Tomato National with a great finish, and look what we found waiting for us, our new clubhouse.
Mater, it's not really a clubhouse, it's the headquarters for all of our professional racing operations. Okay, it's a clubhouse.
With the Mater National officially over, Lightning and Mater go to check out the fully completed clubhouse. Giovanni comes up to Lightning with all the other international racers and thanks him for the amazing week and his great hospitality, hoping that one day he can return the favor. They all get together and take a group photo, ending Cars Mater National Championship. I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoyed this game, but that's not me saying that it doesn't have its fair share of issues. The best way to describe Mater National would be the old phrase, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Because for everything the game does that I like, such as the improved controls, expansion of alternate gameplay styles from the first game, the changes made to Ornament Valley, and some really fun mini-games, there's like 5 more things that I don't. There isn't a whole lot of development info online about Mater National in comparison to the first Cars game. Our only information coming from data mining the game and its prototypes, where it seems that Rainbow Studios had a far more ambitious vision for it. A vision that had to be compromised, presumably due to them being under a lower budget and stricter deadline in order to get the game out while the movie was still fresh in everyone's minds. There's also data in the game's files that suggests Mater National was originally going to be called Cars Supercharged, which was the name of Mattel's Cars toy line that year, so the game could have been rushed out in order to tie in with that. I wouldn't be surprised since there was a Cars Supercharged game released for the Leapster around the same time as Mater National that was also about an international championship held in Radiator Springs. And this game's sequel, Cars Racer-Rama, was named after the Cars toy line released the year it came out. This rushed development cycle and lower budget definitely explains why the game came out the way it did. A bunch of areas from Cars 1 being blocked off during normal gameplay, presumably because the devs didn't have the time to test if they were stable in free roam, the terrible monster truck races, and overall lack of polish, a soundtrack that is literally the exact same as the first games, just with less licensed tracks, and the fact that, with a few exceptions, the cast of the last game is either completely gone, are only found in races or minigames with no role in the story whatsoever, or have been recast with sound-alike voice actors. Voice actors that do a phenomenal job, by the way. I could not tell the difference between Keith Ferguson and Owen Wilson when I was younger, but it's still a downgrade compared to the first game, where every character that returned in it was played by their original voice actor. All tied together by a story that, while not terrible, is a far cry from their previous work. While not some groundbreaking masterpiece with tons of introspective character development, the story of Cars the video game had a lot of heart and was genuinely trying to be a follow-up to the original Cars movie. The plot of Mater National, however, feels like a season of a Cars TV show. A good Cars TV show, but a Cars TV show nonetheless. Overall, Cars Mater National Championship isn't a terrible game. It's pretty good, and I would recommend it to anyone who played the first Cars game and enjoyed it. But it feels a lot more cheap and rushed than that original tie-in game, which is a really big shame, because that's the complete opposite of what the first game was praised for. Wait a second. A racing championship involving cars from all over the world, Mater falling in love with a British car, Lightning's main rival being Italian, and an overall bigger focus on Mater. Oh my god. Pixar stole the plot of this to make Cars 2.